Welcome to this series of short tutorials covering different aspects of InDesign. In this tutorial, I'm going to be covering setting up a document in InDesign, then laying the foundations of setting up a grid. With all my projects, I like to start by creating a project folder. So I'm just going to do that. Apple Shift N for new directory. It's going to call this demo. Okay, you'll note that I use underscores as well. That's because in Unix sometimes spaces can cause problems in file names, so I always use underscores. So inside that directory I'm going to create two more directories, one called images, which is a place where I'm going to put my images, and another directory called project files. Now as I go along I like to save versions of the document rather than doing save. I do a save as, and that means that if a client comes back and wants an earlier version, and I've saved them all, rather than having just one document that you always do a save on. Okay, so I'm just going to close that down. It's worth also mentioning that it's really important in InDesign, if you're going to work in an environment where there might be more than one machine, like in education or in a different office or design studio, is that you might not, whichever machine you are working on might not have access to the same places or hard drives as where you originally made the design. So that will mean that when you load up a document, it might not be able to link to the relevant content which you've got in your design. So it's really important that you have a project folder, and all your images that you use are inside that images folder. That way, if you go to move the project, everything's contained in the one place, so you know you're not going to have lots of missing bits of content. Here's the InDesign interface, which I've talked about before. So we're going to go File, New Document, and I'm just going to run through this dialog box. But first I'm going to show you some layouts which I'm actually going to copy or use as a demonstration. Okay, so I've got a book here which is primarily displaying 4:3 images that have come off a TV from adverts and promos and things like that. So primarily the book's about displaying images rather than too much text. But all this means that they've kind of come up with a grid which enables them to show as much content as possible. And basically it's 4 columns, which are the 4 columns you see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 across, obviously that way, and so on and so forth. And then if you notice on this side of the page, then their grid is basically adaptable enough to be able to kind of, double up the sizes of the images and add text in the relevant columns. So it's really adjustable. If we go to another spread here, you can see just the different, they've added sort of 2 slightly bigger pictures here. There's a lot of white space here, a few columns with a few smaller images, and obviously this side has got a bit more content and a kind of big title there. And just like anything else in design, the layout should come from some sort of idea or from some sort of concept. Now obviously, as I said, this book is mainly TV based, so I guess it's really it's more about a practical way to actually show lots and lots of images. So going back to that other spread, obviously you can get a lot of images in, but it's really important that your design does have some sort of kind of idea behind it. It's not just slapping things onto a page. Now as I'm copying this layout, there's a few things I wanted to point out, and that's that the space in the middle here, which is where the byte of the book is actually slightly bigger than the outside edge. And I've gone around and measured all these measurements to kind of recreate this design. Now obviously if you're creating your own design, you might have to try something and then go back and adjust and try again to get the right kind of feel. Obviously the size of this book is probably determined by the amount of boxes that they could get on a page, and depending on your client and what the costs and kind of brief is, obviously the size and shape of the book may differ. Okay, so let's go back. Let's minimize this for a second. We can always come back to this, and let's go back to InDesign. So this is the new document dialog box. So it's got some presets set up. Now I've been doing some postcards which I don't need, so let's go back to the default. Okay. So number 1, we've got a number of pages. Well, we're going to do a book, so let's start with 20. It doesn't really matter, we can add more later, but just to show you this now. We have facing pages. Now, just like the book that I showed before, obviously the 2 pages side by side are facing each other, and that's what it means by facing pages. If that wasn't clicked on or wasn't highlighted, they'd be individual pages. So if you were doing like a series of posters or a load of PDFs which weren't sort of in a book form, then you would probably have that turned off. But we're going to have facing pages turned on. Okay, so A series. So we're not going to use an A size paper. All the different formats, international formats are there, and you can obviously set some custom ones up yourself. Now I'm going to type in the measurements that I need, which is 255 by 230. That's worth pointing out in here, it's in millimeters. And if I go to preferences, I can change the units up here. Preferences, I can change the units that that displays in. But if I, wanted to put, say someone had given me measurements in point sizes, I could put like 800, and I could just put PT for points, and that will automatically convert that 800 points into millimeters for me. So you don't necessarily have to keep going and changing the units, which in InDesign is shown. But let's go back to how it was, 230. And obviously you've got orientation here as well. Next up is columns. Now, as I was displaying in the demo layout, that's actually got 4 columns. So we're going to type in 4 there. Also, there's gutter. Now, gutter is the space in between the columns. And if I just get back up that demonstration again, you'll see that the gutter is the space between the columns. So if we've got 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we've got these gutter here. So I've measured that as being 8 millimeters. So let me just go back to InDesign and type that in. So it's 8 millimeters. Okay, and the margin, and we can see the margins actually is the space around the edge of the page. So you actually notice that this bit here is actually a bigger margin than that side there, and that's because of the byte of the book. Now this is 2 facing pages, 1, 2, and where they join, often the bind is in this book, so it's quite an old book, so it's a little bit relaxed. But in a new book, sometimes it's hard to get this flat. So there's obviously a bit of wastage area there where you can't actually see the page. So there's always that's always allowed for in the design. So that those measurements here won't necessarily be exactly the same as there, although visually when you open the book they will look the same. Also there's the margin at the top and the bottom. So I'm just going to pop in the margins that I've got, which I've measured. So the top is 17. Let's get rid of that. 17. The bottom is 23. 23. Now you'll notice that as I do that all these numbers keep changing, and that's because it's got this padlocks on, and that means it's constrained, so that as I change one, it changes them all. Now often you'll want that to do that to keep the margins consistent all the way around, but as was just explained in this book, that I don't want it to do that, so I'm going to unclick that. You'll find this little icon of a padlock come up a lot in InDesign and CS Suite programs, and it generally means that there's 2 values that are locked together or unlocked in the case that I've just done now. So let's type in that again, 23, so no, 17 at the top. Okay, and the inside is the space in that bit of the book, which is 25, and the outside is set to 15. Now, currently I've got this as set up as, if I just go back to normal, I'm showing them more options, and if that's not open, then you can just click this button here, and this gives us the option of looking at the bleed. Now generally it's wise to speak to your printers, whoever's going to print the book ultimately, and ask them what their recommendation is. But really 2 to 5, about 2 millimeters to 5 millimeters is generally the accepted amount. I'm going to just type in 3 here to buck the trend. I'm pretty much ready to go. I'm just going to hit OK. And that's going to give us first page. You can see down here in the pages palette, I've got all my pages, my 20 pages represented. I'll scroll down. And there again, if I click on the main window and zoom out, just do an Apple minus on the keyboard, I can see a representation of all my pages. So I'm going to zoom back in. And then scroll up to the top page. So yeah, you can start to see the layout taking shape. Next we're going to get up some guides to help us. If I just drop back to the demonstration book, you can see that horizontally there's 5, although there's 4 columns, there's 5 like boxes horizontally for the images. So what we're going to do is we're going to create guides to help us position these images and help create our grid. Let's go back again. Okay, so the first one I'm going to do, I'm going to pull out a guide. Now guides you can create by clicking and pulling out from the ruler. Now the ruler, if you have not got that displayed, let's just undo that. It's in view and the ruler, and it's Apple R, and that toggles the ruler on and off. Now obviously, as we showed you earlier, it's measuring in millimeters at the moment, and you can obviously change that by going up to preferences and units. But you know, right now millimeters is good for us. So I'm just going to pull out the first guide, and I'm going to position that. Now you'll notice up in this top corner that it's got one measurement there, and that's the distance of where it is on the page, this guide. So actually I want that to be 17, which is bang on the top of the page. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go so on and so forth to create that grid. So I'm going to pull that in the next one, and I'm just going to type in the measurement. Now I've already worked mathematically out on a bit of paper what it should be, and obviously these measurements might not be relevant to your design, so this is just for demonstration purposes. Okay, now I'm doing this, I'm putting these guides onto the first page. Now in a later tutorial I'll talk about how to do this on the master page so that this flows through the whole book, so you don't have to do this on every page. It's obviously quite time consuming. We'll be able to copy and paste them into the master page, but yeah, there again, I'll talk about that in the next tutorial. But right now I'm going to save my work, so I'm just going to go File, Save, and I'm going to find my project, demo project. And I'm just going to that directory that I created called Project Files, and I'm going to call this Demo Book version 1. Let's just cap that, D, and going to hit Save. Now every time I save, I'll do a Save As and add version 2, 3, etc. Now in this true style of Blue Peter, here's one I produced earlier. Let's go Open, and not sure where that is. Go Desktop. Okay, Demo Book with Grid. Let's open that. And this one is pre-done with all the boxes already placed. So this is I can place images into these boxes. So we're really starting to create a grid. I can, if I just grab my selection tool, maybe delete a couple of these boxes. And then if I wanted to make a slightly bigger image, I could just do this. Now if we go back to our book, you can see that this one, there's a bigger image here, then there's smaller images and 2 columns. So let's go back to, let's just kind of copy that. So here became columns, so let's delete. I can create that as a column. And obviously right now these are just shapes that, select this one. So there you go. If I toggle back again, we can see that there's a big image, 2 columns, and sort of 6, 8, 9, 10 images. So we've got 1, 2, 10, and 2 columns. So you can see how quickly I made that page. And by having this grid up, I can kind of reconfigure the page however I wish. If I scroll back again, obviously this image, if I go to that page, let's say this one here, we've got 2 bigger images, smaller images, and 2 columns. So you can see how quickly and easily it is to configure your grid and change things around. Okay, so that's the end of this tutorial, and I'll hopefully see you in your next.